This Japanese training method heals knee pain almost instantly. And you may already know what I'm talking about. It is known as blood flow restriction training. This is typically reserved for muscle size with low load training. However, it may be useful if you are suffering from some kind of tendon pain. And this new meta-analysis on blood flow restriction training and knee pain is quite interesting. So they pulled 15 studies that met their criteria and grouped them based on the type of knee pain. Now they had other things in there like ACL surgeries and things, but for me, I was just interested in the patellofemoral pain, since that is probably what is most common. If you do have knee pain, that's probably what you're suffering from, assuming it's not structural damage. Now what's interesting is they found a non-significant improvement for reducing knee pain, which means there's likely no effect of blood flow restriction training on improving patellofemoral pain. Now, bear in mind that there were only 2 studies assessing this outcome within this meta-analysis and systematic review, so you've got to take these results with a grain of salt. But in my experience, blood flow restriction training often helps with knee pain, and I've been using it extensively as part of my own training, and it has helped my knees tremendously. So I'm going to share with you practically how you can implement this so you can get through good training sessions and make continual improvement while improving your knee pain without having to resort to some wacky exercises. So here's the first thing I do, and probably the most effective in my opinion, and the one I've been using a lot lately, and that is the blood flow restriction training warm-up. And if you've got some miles on you and you are going to do squats or some kind of leg work as part of your training day, you know that typically these movements tend to flare up issues within the knee. And it can take a while to get warm, and sometimes it can never really get warm enough to allow you to do heavy lifting. So this is what I'll do, and I'll show you some video on the screen of the process, but I'll wrap the top of my thighs with a Voodoo Floss band because that's just what I have. It's typically the easiest to use and the cheapest to use. You can find Voodoo Floss bands probably, honestly, anywhere on the internet now with most fitness places. You can use blood flow restriction cuffs or tourniquets that are specifically designed for this. Obviously they cost a bit more, worth the investment if you're gonna do this more often, but I just use the Voodoo Floss bands. And what I'll do is I'll try tie it to about a 6 or 7 out of 10. Now, typically I'll try and make them not as tight as I'm trying to do if I'm doing, say, a hypertrophy style set. I wanna be able to wear them throughout my entire warm-up, which means they're gonna be on for a prolonged period of time. So if you do them too tight, it's gonna be way too uncomfortable. You're gonna cut the blood flow to your legs. You don't wanna do that. So you wanna have them where it's slightly uncomfortable, and that when you get a little bit of a pump, that you can still feel like it's there, but you don't want it to be in pain. From here, I'll do some bodyweight movements as part of a little circuit. Typically just like squats. If you're feeling up to it, you can do some kind of lunges. In this particular scenario I'm showing you now, it's just literally squats, some around the worlds with the band, and then some neck work. And I'll just do like a little circuit of that. Obviously you can put in the circuit whatever you like. You can even jump rope during this. I've done that with the blood flow restriction bands. You can even do very extensive plyometrics as well. Essentially anything to get your knee moving through a full range of motion and moving through movements that typically cause problems. So if you know, for example, squatting usually hurts your knees, when you put the bands on, you can typically squat with little to no knee pain at the very beginning, and then after a set or two, then you start to attenuate that pain entirely. So try and do movements where you usually have pain and you want to kind of gauge that feeling and see how it progresses as you perform the warm-up with the bands. Now after that, you want to go straight into your warm-up sets as soon as possible with the barbell. So in this particular day that I'm showing you, I was doing some kind of snatch work, so I was doing some snatch warm-ups. I also do this typically if I squat first. And that means I'm gonna get under the bar, I'm gonna do some reps with the bar with the Voodoo Floss bands still on. Typically I'm gonna do like 5 to 10 reps on the first set, and then I'll probably do 1 or 2 more sets with less reps, anywhere from like 3 to 5 reps, just to get the blood flowing and just get the movement dialed in and get into those positions without pain. Then the next important thing is I'll typically do the first warm-up set, so whatever the weight is for that. So for example, if I'm adding 20s on the bar for squats and I'm doing a 60 kilo squat, I will do 2 or 3 sets at that weight with the BFR bands on. So that'll be typically performing 5 reps for the first set, and then I'll probably do 2 to 3 reps on sets 2 or 3. In this particular example I'm showing you, because I'm using the snatch movement, it's a bit hard to do it with the bands on. So I just did a few more warm-up sets with the bands, and I took them off for the first set when I did, I think it was 40 kilos there. With the squat, I will do the actual movement with the BFR bands on. And importantly, which cannot be missed, is when you take the bands off after that, do another warm-up set with the same weight without the bands, because the feeling's different. When you have the bands on tight, you almost feel a little more secure. When you take them off, you want to get the feeling of squatting or performing the movement without the bands before going up in weight again. And then obviously just take a little small increments on the way up than maybe you typically would, and your knees should feel much better than if you didn't use the bands at all. So give that a go as part of your next warm-ups. You can even do it before you get on the mats. If you're in the gym, you can just tie the bands up, do a little bodyweight circuit, and then get into your grappling or boxing or whatever it is. The second option that I'll sometimes do if I've had, say a heavier lower body day, or I've done a little more jumping or weightlifting than I typically would, is to use what I like to call is quote-unquote like a reset. I mean, it's like a cool down, but not a cool down, because cool downs don't do shit. If you're just static stretching as part of your cool down, you're literally just wasting your time. I've done a whole video on this way back in the past, but instead I want to think about this quote-unquote cool down period almost as like a reset or preparing myself for the following day. If I know maybe I have a hard grappling session the next day, or maybe I just have another lifting session the following day, I want to make sure that my knees feel good the following day, because I know if I don't do anything, they're going to feel a little stiff. So this is when you'll bring in something like a blood flow restriction hypertrophy style set, which is essentially kind of what most of the research is on. So you're gonna do the same thing with wrapping your legs, and you're gonna pick an isolation movement, something like the leg extension. The leg extension works well because you're just kind of in there, you're just kind of moving your legs. You can do squats, but it's pretty taxing to do it with squats. I mean, you can do it with bodyweight squats if you didn't have a machine, that would be fine. You could also do it with lunges. It's just not as effective in my experience because you're alternating legs, so you don't just keep the blood flow going in the legs at once. It kind of just alternates and dissipates. So leg extensions, bodyweight squats, probably your best options with this. You're then going to do the traditional blood flow restriction training protocol, which is 4 sets, 30, 15, 15, 15. Those are your reps. 30 to 60 seconds rest between each set. Now, on the first set, you don't have to go to 30. You can do anywhere from 20 to 30. You just want to get a really good pump on that first set, which will set you up for the following 3 sets. The weight should be really light enough where you can get through all those reps and then get through all the sets afterwards. It's gonna feel uncomfortable, that's the entire point, but your knees will feel great after doing something like this. In terms of the rest between the sets, because if you're using bands, you wanna keep them on. You don't wanna take them off because it's gonna take you another minute to wrap them back up anyway. So you're gonna keep the bands on. If you're using proper BFR cuffs, you can loosen them and then tighten them again because it's relatively easy, but keeping them on is honestly just the easiest thing to do. The other benefit from doing this is typically when you do have knee pain, you tend to avoid or at least limit the loading of your legs and your quads, and then you start to lose your strength there, and then the knee pain just starts to get worse. This allows you to actually load the tendon and load the muscles. You get stronger, you start to remodel the tendon as well. So you get the double benefit of reducing that pain acutely, like before the session, or resetting for the next day. Plus you actually start to improve strength of your quads and then start to remodel that tendon because you're actually starting to load it. Now, if you're wondering how often you should use a technique like this, honestly, if you're doing this as part of your warm-ups, you could do this as part of your warm-ups every single time you train, especially if your knees are a real problem and you find that it works for you. In terms of the actual reset, I would only really use it if you have a very hard, say, lower body session and you know the following day you're gonna be in some kind of pain or maybe some kind of stiffness going on the following day, or the next day you have something important that you need to train for. That's when it will work well as well. And especially if you're an older combat athlete, something like this can help keep you on the mats or in the cage or in the ring. This is just a couple of applications of blood flow restriction training. I actually have a full breakdown of blood flow restriction training, the science, and how you can use it in this video right here.